The first time the aliens arrived, no one could believe it. Massive ships appeared silently above Earth, hovering over oceans and cities like dark, glimmering shadows. The world froze. No one knew whether to panic, hide, or watch in awe. Governments issued statements. Scientists scrambled to make sense of the phenomenon, and people everywhere stared at the sky, holding their breaths. It was not a slow invasion. They did not land, they did not make threats. They simply observed. And that was enough to make every human heart beat faster. At first, the aliens' intentions were a mystery. Their ships were unlike anything humans had ever seen, smooth, metallic, without any seams or markings. Their movements were deliberate, almost careful, as if they were studying something fragile. News channels buzzed with speculation. Were they friendly explorers? Were they scouts for a massive invasion? Entire nations debated how to respond, but nothing seemed appropriate. No one had ever dealt with a species like this. Inside government and research facilities, the aliens' presence caused panic and fascination at the same time. Scientists were sent to study every piece of evidence they could gather, while military leaders tried to analyze the ships for weaknesses. Satellites were redirected, telescopes trained on the strange shapes, and drones were deployed for closer observation. The aliens, however, did not seem to care. They moved slowly, deliberately, always observing, never attacking. This calm, calculated approach unnerved humans even more. As the days passed, it became clear that the aliens were not just watching Earth. They were watching humans. They studied human behavior with a focus that almost felt intelligent. At first, humans tried to act normally, as if going about daily life would make them seem less threatening. But the aliens seemed to notice everything. Every movement, every response, every instinct. It was as if they were trying to understand the species. Not just its technology, but its mind, its instincts, its very nature. Soon, reports came from people who had witnessed unusual interactions. In crowded cities, some noticed drones or devices that seemed to follow specific individuals more closely than others. In remote areas, animals acted strangely around the aliens' energy fields. Scientists started to realize that these visitors were not just interested in machines or cities. They were studying humans in the wild, in the way animals might study prey in a forest. It was unsettling to think of themselves as something being watched for patterns, strengths, and weaknesses. The aliens' observation raised questions humans had never considered about themselves. What made humans different from other animals? Was it intelligence alone? Was it creativity, or was it aggression, adaptability, or the drive to survive at all costs? Across the world, people began to notice that the aliens seemed particularly interested in certain traits. Humans who were quick, clever, or capable of extreme focus attracted more attention than others. Humans who acted with courage or ruthlessness stood out. Among all nations, Americans caught the aliens' attention more than anyone else. Perhaps it was their history of exploration, their tendency to push limits, or the way some humans excelled at strategy and survival. Military experts were baffled at how quickly American response teams adapted to new situations. Civilians who were good at improvising, hunting, or planning displayed a strange effectiveness that the aliens seemed to recognize immediately. While humans themselves did not notice it at first, the aliens began to categorize traits, mapping human instincts and behavior with careful precision. Despite the global fear, life went on in small ways. Children went to school, markets stayed open, and people still took walks in parks, though they looked up constantly. Some tried to communicate. Scientists broadcast signals in hopes of sending a friendly message, using language and mathematics. The aliens responded not in words, but with patterns, pulses, and movements that no human could fully understand. Every attempt to decode them ended with the same realization. Humans were under observation, but not as equals. They were being studied as a species, as if the aliens were trying to predict how humans would act when faced with the unknown. And humans, true to form, did not remain passive. Even before they fully understood the aliens' intentions, they began testing themselves, pushing limits. Survival exercises became more extreme, technology development accelerated, and teams began practicing rapid decision-making under pressure. The presence of the aliens forced humans to sharpen instincts they had long taken for granted. Americans in particular seemed to thrive under this pressure. From dense cities to remote deserts, they organized, strategized, and adapted in ways that drew even more attention from the silent observers. As the weeks turned into months, Scientists started sharing a startling discovery. The aliens were not merely curious, they were cautious. They had studied countless species across the galaxy, but they had never encountered one quite like humans. They recognized patterns that hinted at both creativity and danger. The term predator started to circulate quietly among the scientists who were able to interpret alien signals. Humans were not just survivors. They had instincts that, if unleashed, could make them a dominant force far beyond Earth. Meanwhile, humans continued to go about their daily lives, unaware that they were becoming the subject of a galactic study. Farmers noticed unusual changes in animal behavior. Military strategists saw the aliens' subtle adjustments to their patrols, and ordinary people caught glimpses of the ships moving over cities and deserts. Yet life continued. People learned to live with the watchers above them, adjusting routines, developing new technologies, and strengthening survival skills. It was not long before the first experiment by the aliens took place, although humans did not know it at the time. Small anomalies, sudden power fluctuations, strange energy fields, these were all tests. The aliens were gauging how humans responded to challenges, tracking how quickly they adapted, and noting who took initiative versus who froze in fear. Americans, with their culture of risk-taking and ingenuity, often outperformed expectations. Whether it was a survivalist navigating a desert, engineers repairing unexpected damage, or strategists improvising under pressure, their actions caught the attention of the alien observers more than anyone else. People began to sense the aliens' presence not as threat, but as a challenge. Conspiracy theories ran rampant online, but underneath them, something else grew. A shared human curiosity, pride, and determination. If the aliens were watching, humans thought, then they had better see something worth studying. In this quiet way, Earth's population began to act like a species that knew it was being tested. The aliens had not intended to provoke this, but humans could not resist. Survival, adaptation, and competition were too deeply rooted. By the time the world fully realized the aliens were cataloging human behavior, it was already too late to act normally. Humans had changed subtly but irreversibly. They were more alert, more careful, and more innovative. Americans, in particular, emerged as a species within the species, highly capable, quick to respond, and unusually strategic. From crowded cities to remote wilderness, humans began displaying qualities that set them apart. The aliens, silently watching from above, had to acknowledge a truth they had not expected. These humans were not ordinary creatures. They were predators in their own right. And in the quiet moments when the night sky was filled with the silent, hovering ships, humans looked back up, not with fear, but with curiosity. The watchers had arrived, but so had the challenge. Humans had always hunted, always adapted, always survived, and now, on a global stage bigger than they had ever imagined, they had an audience that could either witness their rise or regret underestimating them. For the first time, the galaxy was beginning to understand humans, and humans, unknowingly, were beginning to show the universe exactly why they could never be ignored. The more humans watched the sky, the more they began to realize that the aliens were studying them not just as a species, but as individuals. It was not a uniform observation. Some people noticed subtle patterns, tiny lights in the night, ships that hovered longer over certain areas, or strange energy pulses that seemed to respond to human actions. At first, people dismissed these signs as coincidence or technical glitches, but over time, it became clear that the aliens were analyzing human behavior in a way that no one had anticipated. Scientists worked day and night to understand the aliens' methods. They collected data from satellites, radar, and ground sensors, trying to predict what the visitors wanted. Researchers began noticing that the aliens paid particular attention to humans who displayed initiative. Those who took risks, adapted quickly, or showed courage were studied more closely. Ordinary people doing ordinary things barely drew notice, but those with unusual focus or skill attracted the aliens' attention immediately. The idea spread quietly among scientists that the visitors were measuring something far deeper than intelligence. They were measuring instinct, strategy, and adaptability. Across the globe, this caused a subtle shift in human behavior. People started testing themselves, sometimes consciously, often unconsciously. In cities, individuals found ways to challenge themselves daily, solving problems, taking risks, and improving skills. In rural areas, hunters and survivalists noticed their instincts sharpening. Even children, playing games in parks or forests, demonstrated strategies and tactics that drew attention. Humans were adapting, growing stronger and learning faster than they realized, all while under the silent gaze of the aliens. Americans, in particular, seemed to excel at this without even trying. Their culture, which encouraged self-reliance, problem-solving, and courage under pressure, gave them an advantage. Soldiers in training, engineers, survivalists, and even ordinary citizens began to act instinctively in ways that seemed almost extraordinary. The aliens noticed quickly. They began marking patterns, recording behaviors, and comparing them to every other species they had studied. The more they observed, the clearer it became. Humans were not merely reactive. They were hunters, thinkers, and strategists all in one. Governments were aware of this interest but struggled to interpret it. While the aliens had not made contact, their presence influenced global decision-making. Leaders debated whether to hide, to respond, or to show strength. Militaries began drills, preparing for scenarios no one fully understood. Scientists argued for observation and study. Ordinary people, unaware of the full extent, simply carried on, learning to be more cautious, aware, and clever in their daily lives. This mix of fear, curiosity, and adaptation created a new rhythm of life, humans operating at a higher level of alertness without even noticing it. Meanwhile, the aliens escalated their experiments in subtle ways. Small anomalies appeared in remote areas, energy fields that disrupted electronics, strange creatures designed to test perception and response, and environmental changes that pushed humans to adapt. Each test was carefully calculated, measured, and recorded. People on the ground often thought they were encountering natural phenomena, technical malfunctions, or wildlife behavior. Few understood that every event was a controlled challenge, designed to measure how humans reacted under stress, danger, or uncertainty. The Americans, true to their instinct for action, rose to the challenge more effectively than most. Survivalists in the wilderness quickly learned to navigate energy fields, military teams improvised new strategies, and engineers managed to reverse engineer or repurpose alien technology for practical use. Their ability to adapt drew the aliens' attention repeatedly. The aliens' initial curiosity turned to careful study, almost admiration. Here was a species that not only survived, but improved under pressure. Humans were more than resilient. They were predators, but with discipline and strategy. Stories began to emerge quietly among those paying attention. A small group of soldiers reported unusual patterns during training exercises that mirrored alien behavior. Hunters in deserts noticed creatures or energy fields that seemed to anticipate human moves. Engineers fixing power grids during unexplained fluctuations discovered that their solutions worked faster than expected, almost as if the aliens were testing their problem-solving ability. These incidents were shared within secret networks, building a sense that something bigger than Earth was watching. While the aliens' motives remained unclear, their actions had a profound effect. People began to recognize their own potential. Everyday humans discovered they could think faster, move more strategically, and solve problems under pressure. Communities became more resilient. Cities improved coordination in emergencies. Remote areas adapted to challenges that seemed impossible before. Humans were awakening to their instincts even without realizing it, because something unseen was observing, pushing, and challenging them from above. The aliens' observations also revealed a pattern that surprised them. Unlike other species they had studied, humans did not rely purely on instinct. Humans combined instinct with learning, communication, and improvisation. When faced with danger, they did not just flee or fight blindly. They studied, planned, and executed strategies. They learned from mistakes immediately and passed knowledge quickly. The aliens realized that humans' hunting instincts were magnified by intellect and teamwork. This made them unpredictable and dangerous in ways that even the most advanced species could not easily anticipate. Among the aliens, discussions began quietly. They had expected intelligence, creativity, or technology. They had not expected patience, observation, and strategic thinking, combined with raw survival instinct. Humans were not just reacting, they were anticipating, adapting, and innovating. The species had evolved to survive threats far greater than any individual alien force could present. It became clear that humans were predators in their own right, capable of turning any challenge into an opportunity. As the months passed, humans became more aware of subtle patterns. People who had once been indifferent to survival began noticing behaviors, signals, and changes in their environment. Ordinary citizens started testing themselves in ways that mirrored the aliens' own experiments. Small groups formed to solve unusual problems or to train under extreme conditions. The instinct to survive was universal, but the instinct to improve, adapt, and plan became increasingly visible. Humans were quietly proving that they could handle challenges that seemed impossible. Americans, in particular, became the face of this evolution. From urban environments to wilderness areas, they organized, trained, and executed tasks with efficiency and creativity. They were not always the strongest physically, but their ability to combine intellect, observation, and action made them stand out. When alien-controlled simulations or anomalies occurred, Americans adapted quickly, solved problems, and in many cases, turned the experiment in their favor. The aliens noticed, recorded, and analyzed every success, and this marked a turning point. The realization grew among the aliens that humans were not simply survivors, they were hunters in the truest sense. They observed threats, studied behavior, adapted tactics, and executed plans with precision. They did not rely solely on chance or instinct. They relied on intellect amplified by raw drive. For the first time, the aliens faced a species they could not easily predict, control, or outmaneuver. Humans were proving to be more than resilient. They were dominant in ways that transcended technology or brute force. This slow but steady emergence of human capability changed the dynamic. While the aliens remained cautious, humans unknowingly began demonstrating their true potential. Individuals learned to navigate danger with skill, communities adapted quickly, and Americans in particular led by example. The aliens watched silently as humans tested limits, solved problems under pressure, and discovered capabilities they did not know they had. By the end of this period, a quiet tension filled the atmosphere. Humans were evolving under observation, but not with awareness of the full scale of the test. The aliens realized that Earth's population, led by particularly resourceful Americans, had become a species capable of handling threats far beyond the planet itself. They were no longer just inhabitants, they were hunters, strategists, and predators in a galaxy that had never seen anything like them. And while humans continued their lives, mostly unaware of the magnitude of the situation, the foundation had been laid. They were being tested, observed, and challenged, yet they were responding with skill, creativity, and instinct. Every adaptation, every solution, every act of courage reinforced one truth: humans, when pushed, could rise above fear, understand the unknown, and dominate challenges with precision. By the time anyone fully realized what was happening, humans had already begun their ascent. They were no longer simply reacting to a new presence. They were learning, adapting, and preparing. And above them, the aliens watched silently, increasingly aware that this species, underestimated for too long, might one day redefine what it meant to be a predator. The stage was set. Humans unknowingly had begun proving that they were more than survivalists. They were hunters, innovators, and strategists. And in this quiet struggle of observation and adaptation, Americans led the charge, demonstrating abilities that humans were starting to realize that the aliens were not just observers, they were testing them. At first, the signs were subtle. Small disturbances appeared in the wilderness, unexplained changes in technology, and animals behaving strangely near energy fields. People thought these were natural phenomena or coincidences, but slowly patterns began to emerge. It became clear that someone or something was orchestrating these events to see how humans would respond. The first people to notice were those who already thrived in challenging environments. Survivalists in forests and deserts began sensing unusual signals, shifts in the air and faint lights that seemed to move intelligently. They could feel instinctively that someone was watching, measuring, and waiting for a reaction. Hunters in remote regions noticed that their usual skills were suddenly being pushed to their limits, as if the environment itself had been designed to test them. And they adapted. They learned to move silently, track subtle changes, and anticipate events before they happened. In cities, engineers and technicians experienced strange malfunctions. Power grids would flicker, communication devices acted strangely, and transportation systems sometimes froze for no reason. At first, people thought it was technical errors or human mistakes. But some noticed that these anomalies often coincided with high-stress situations or unexpected decisions. The aliens were creating controlled challenges, testing how humans would respond under pressure. And humans, true to form, were learning fast. Americans, in particular, began excelling under these conditions. Their culture of problem-solving, improvisation, and bold thinking gave them an advantage. Military units conducted training in unpredictable situations, engineers invented new ways to fix systems under pressure, and survivalists found clever methods to navigate challenges that seemed impossible. It was as if every American instinctively knew how to turn obstacles into opportunities. The aliens, quietly observing, began recording and analyzing these behaviors with increasing fascination. The first large-scale test came unexpectedly. In a desert region far from cities, an unusual energy field appeared. At first it seemed harmless, just a flicker in the air, but then it intensified, causing strange atmospheric effects. The area was declared unsafe, yet a small group of people decided to investigate. They were ordinary humans with extraordinary instincts. They moved carefully, scanning the environment, noting details the casual observer would miss. The energy field reacted to their movements, testing their patience, precision, and decision-making. Hours passed, and the group adapted. They found ways to predict changes, avoid hazards, and even manipulate the field slightly with simple tools. By the time the event ended, the humans had learned more about the anomaly than the aliens expected. It was not a failure for the visitors, it was a revelation. They began to understand that humans were not just reactive. They were strategic, innovative, and capable of learning faster than any other species the aliens had studied. News of these events spread quietly among those paying attention. Communities began to notice that unusual challenges seemed to follow patterns. Engineers shared methods of adapting to sudden malfunctions. Survivalists taught techniques for navigating strange conditions. And even civilians began noticing subtle environmental changes that could indicate danger. Humans were becoming more aware of their instincts, sharpening their minds and bodies in response to a force they could barely see. The aliens escalated their tests. Small synthetic creatures appeared in remote areas, designed to simulate threats. They were fast, silent, and unpredictable, meant to challenge humans' tracking and combat skills. At first, many people were caught off guard, but the Americans excelled. Hunters and soldiers used observation, strategy, and teamwork to outsmart these creatures. Every encounter was a lesson, and humans learned quickly, adapting to each challenge with remarkable efficiency. The aliens recorded every movement, analyzing tactics, strategy, and instinct. One of the most fascinating aspects to the observers was humans' ability to combine intellect with instinct. Unlike other species, humans did not rely solely on raw speed or strength. They studied their surroundings, noticed patterns, and planned several steps ahead. They communicated, shared knowledge, and improved techniques rapidly. It was as if every encounter made them stronger and more unpredictable. The aliens realized that humans were learning faster than they could calculate, turning every test into a stepping stone for their own growth. In urban areas, the aliens' influence was less obvious but equally effective. Random malfunctions in transportation systems, energy grids, and communication networks forced people to think quickly. Engineers and problem solvers were pushed to invent solutions on the spot. When cities experienced sudden power failures, humans adapted, coordinated, and found ways to maintain order. Even ordinary people discovered hidden strengths in themselves, learning to stay calm, think critically, and act decisively under pressure. The presence of the aliens began to change the human mindset. People started to view challenges as opportunities to learn and grow. Children developed curiosity and resourcefulness beyond what was typical. Adults noticed their own ability to respond to unexpected situations improving. Communities became more cohesive, sharing knowledge and supporting one another in ways that increased resilience. The world unknowingly was becoming a species capable of responding to any threat. The aliens began to realize that humans were not only survivors, they were hunters, thinkers, and strategists. They studied patterns, adapted quickly, and used every resource available. Nothing was wasted. Every failure became a lesson, and unlike any other species observed, humans did not rely purely on instinct. They combined instinct with logic, innovation, and communication. The result was unpredictable, intelligent, and highly effective behavior that even the aliens found remarkable. As humans continued to adapt, Some began to suspect that their challenges were not natural. Farmers noticed strange shifts in wildlife behavior. Hikers saw patterns in the environment that seemed unnatural, and engineers discovered anomalies that could not be explained by human error. Yet no one understood the scale or purpose of these tests. Humans were learning without fully realizing they were being observed and analyzed by an entire species from another world. Americans, with their history of exploration and adaptability, continued to stand out. Teams of soldiers, engineers, and survivalists became the face of human potential. They organized, strategized, and executed plans with precision. They could anticipate problems, adapt tools, and exploit weaknesses in situations that seemed impossible. Even ordinary people, inspired by these examples, began to act with greater confidence, creativity, and strategic thinking. Humans were proving their capacity to handle challenges beyond Earth itself. The aliens began to take note of one unique human quality: the ability to turn observation into advantage. Humans learned quickly by watching, experimenting, and analyzing. They could predict movements, anticipate hazards, and develop strategies that improved with every encounter. No other species the aliens had observed possessed such a combination of instinct, intelligence, and adaptability. Humans were evolving before their eyes, showing that survival alone was not enough. They were mastering the art of the hunt. This evolution was subtle, but undeniable. Ordinary humans became more aware of their surroundings, developed sharper instincts, and learned to respond creatively to unexpected events. Communities became more resilient, training together and sharing knowledge. Americans, in particular, demonstrated a talent for innovation under pressure, whether navigating wilderness challenges, solving technical problems, or leading groups through dangerous situations. Every test, anomaly, or obstacle pushed humans to grow stronger and more capable. The aliens realized that they had underestimated humans. Initially, they expected a primitive species, reactive and predictable. Instead, they found a species that could learn, adapt, and innovate faster than any calculation could predict. Humans were not just surviving, they were evolving into predators capable of responding to threats far beyond their world. The combination of instinct, intellect, and teamwork created a species that was unpredictable, efficient, and incredibly dangerous to underestimate. By the end of this phase, humans had unknowingly reached a new level of capability. They had adapted to challenges, solved impossible problems, and learned skills they never knew they had. Americans led the way, demonstrating exceptional ability in strategy, observation, and innovation. The aliens, silently watching, began to realize that Earth was no longer a simple planet of primitive creatures. It was home to hunters, thinkers, and strategists who could dominate challenges across any environment. And as humans continued their lives, learning, adapting, and overcoming obstacles, the aliens understood something that had never been obvious before. This species, underestimated for so long, was not to be taken lightly. Humans were capable, relentless, and intelligent, with instincts and strategy that made them more than just survivors. They were hunters, and the galaxy would soon have to understand that humans, especially Americans, were a force unlike any other ever observed. By the time humans had begun to realize that the aliens were testing them, the challenges had escalated. These were no longer simple anomalies or strange creatures in remote areas. Entire landscapes seemed to change overnight, testing human skill, endurance, and ingenuity. The world had become a vast playground and battlefield at the same time, and humans were the unwitting players. Most people still had no idea why these strange events were happening, but they adapted naturally. In deserts, forests, and mountains, sudden changes appeared without warning. Rivers would shift paths, creating obstacles that forced people to find new ways to cross. Strong winds or unusual weather patterns challenged travelers and outdoor workers, while equipment sometimes failed at critical moments. Each event was designed to push humans beyond their comfort zone, to test their problem-solving abilities, reflexes, and determination. What the aliens did not expect, however, was how quickly humans would respond. Americans in particular seemed to thrive under pressure. They had a tendency to remain calm when others panicked, and their ingenuity allowed them to turn disadvantages into opportunities. Soldiers, survivalists, engineers, and ordinary civilians who had learned to adapt worked together to overcome obstacles, They built improvised tools, coordinated efforts, and devised strategies that turned chaotic events into manageable situations. The aliens watched quietly, taking note of these patterns. One example occurred in a vast desert region. A massive energy field appeared, disrupting all vehicles and electronic devices. Military teams and survivalists who ventured into the area found themselves cut off from communication and transport. At first it seemed impossible to proceed, but humans relied on instinct, observation, and resourcefulness. They tracked patterns in the shifting sand, identified safe paths, and even used the sun and shadows for navigation. By combining intelligence with survival skills, they managed to complete tasks that the aliens assumed would take days or fail entirely. Meanwhile, urban areas experienced different kinds of challenges. Power grids flickered unpredictably, transportation systems stalled, and communication networks became unreliable. Engineers, city planners, and ordinary citizens began working together to maintain order and restore functionality. What appeared to be chaos forced humans to innovate quickly. Temporary fixes became long-term solutions, and small communities learned to coordinate efficiently under pressure. The aliens, observing these responses, started to recognize a level of adaptability they had never seen before. The tests were not limited to physical challenges. Subtle psychological and strategic trials were introduced as well. Unpredictable patterns of behavior from animals, sudden environmental shifts, and even strange sound patterns created situations where humans had to think several steps ahead. Unlike any other species observed in the galaxy, humans adapted not only to survive but to thrive. They learned from each event, improved their approach, and anticipated future challenges. Americans led many of these adaptations. In wilderness areas, teams developed advanced tracking skills, learned to anticipate danger, and communicated silently to coordinate movements. Engineers found ways to repair malfunctioning equipment using unconventional methods. Civilians began to recognize and respect human instincts and ingenuity as crucial survival tools. These examples quickly spread through local networks, teaching others how to respond effectively. The aliens began to understand a profound truth. Humans were not just survivors. They were hunters, strategists, and problem solvers. They observed threats, analyzed patterns, adapted strategies, and executed plans with precision. Each new test revealed another layer of human ability that made them increasingly unpredictable. Unlike other species, humans were not bound by instinct alone. They combined instinct with intelligence, creativity, and teamwork. One particularly revealing test involved a group of humans sent into a dense forest where unusual energy fields created unpredictable obstacles. Trees and terrain shifted subtly, and electronic devices stopped functioning at critical moments. At first, the team faced delays and confusion, but humans quickly adapted. They observed patterns in the forest's behavior, mapped safe paths, and communicated silently to coordinate movements. By anticipating changes and reacting quickly, they completed objectives faster than the aliens expected. These events began to reshape human culture. Communities became more connected, sharing knowledge and strategies for surviving unexpected challenges. Children developed problem-solving skills naturally, learning to observe, anticipate, and adapt. Adults discovered hidden strengths in themselves, realizing that they could respond to danger or uncertainty with calm, intelligence, and creativity. The world unknowingly was becoming a species prepared for threats far beyond its understanding. The aliens noticed that Americans were consistently outperforming others. Their culture of self-reliance, innovation, and problem-solving made them highly effective in these tests. Whether navigating deserts, forests, or urban challenges, Americans combined intelligence, instinct, and collaboration in ways that were difficult for the aliens to predict. This made humans a species of interest like no other. At the same time, humans began to show an unusual ability to learn from mistakes. Failed attempts at crossing energy fields, repairing devices, or solving strategic problems were not wasted. Humans analyzed their errors, adjusted tactics, and succeeded on the next attempt. This rapid learning curve was unlike anything the aliens had ever encountered. It revealed a species capable of evolving strategies at an incredible speed, turning challenges into opportunities and weakness into strength. Even ordinary humans, who were not part of organized teams, began showing the effects of these trials. People became more aware of their environment, learned to anticipate small hazards, and developed quick decision-making skills. Communities coordinated in ways that improved efficiency and safety. Humans were developing instinctive teamwork, learning to share knowledge and responding to challenges in ways that would have been impossible just months earlier. The aliens began to adjust their observations. Initially, they had believed humans were reactive and chaotic, but now they realized humans were proactive, analytical, and innovative. They were no longer just observers. They were learning to predict human responses and were being surprised repeatedly. Humans had evolved in ways that combined instinct, intelligence, and strategy, making them hunters capable of handling situations far more complex than any previously studied species. One remarkable example occurred when a sudden desert storm forced a team of humans to seek shelter. Communications failed and navigation systems were offline. Instead of panicking, the team used observation, tracking, and environmental cues to find a safe path. They improvised shelters and tools, adapted to the harsh conditions, and completed their mission efficiently. The aliens observing remotely were both impressed and cautious. They had underestimated the human capacity for adaptation and ingenuity. Across the globe, similar stories unfolded. Urban communities developed new methods to coordinate during unexpected crises. Engineers improvised solutions to power failures. Survivalists and outdoor enthusiasts found ways to navigate changing terrains. Even children learned to anticipate problems, develop strategies, and cooperate with others. The aliens realized that human development under pressure was not accidental. It was instinctive, adaptive, and highly effective. By now, it was clear that Americans were leading this evolution. Their combination of creativity, problem-solving, and adaptability made them stand out among humans. They consistently excelled in physical, mental, and strategic challenges. This drew particular attention from the aliens, who began analyzing their techniques, decisions, and patterns of behavior. The realization became undeniable. Humans were not only survivors, they were hunters, strategists, and innovators capable of responding to any challenge. The world had changed quietly but dramatically. Humans had adapted to a level of awareness and skill that even the aliens had not anticipated. Communities were stronger, individuals more capable, and humans as a species more unpredictable than ever. Americans in particular demonstrated abilities that made them a model of human potential. Calm under pressure, creative in problem-solving, and strategic in their approach to danger. The aliens understood that the test they had set in motion was no longer a simple experiment. Humans were evolving beyond expectation. They were learning faster, adapting smarter, and responding more effectively than any species the aliens had ever studied. The combination of instinct, intelligence, and innovation made humans a species that could not be predicted, controlled, or underestimated. By the end of this period, humans had proven that they were more than survivors. They were hunters, problem solvers, and strategists who could face challenges with intelligence, adaptability, and teamwork. Americans, in particular, had become an example of human potential in action, demonstrating skills that drew attention from across the galaxy. And while humans continued their lives mostly unaware of the scale of observation, the aliens had begun to realize a truth that would change the way they viewed Earth forever. This species, underestimated for centuries, was capable of mastering challenges far beyond its own planet. Humans had risen quietly, adapting and learning, showing. By this stage, humans were no longer just responding to the challenges set by the aliens. They were beginning to anticipate them. The subtle tests that had once been surprises were now puzzles to solve, and humans were getting faster and smarter with each new obstacle. They were learning not just to survive, but to thrive under pressure. In deserts, forests, mountains, and cities, ordinary people discovered that their instincts, intelligence, and teamwork gave them an edge they had never imagined. The Americans, in particular, had become the leaders in this silent evolution. Their culture of problem-solving, improvisation, and bold decision-making had prepared them for situations that would have overwhelmed other humans. Teams of survivalists, engineers, and soldiers moved with precision and calm, reading subtle cues in the environment that others might miss. They learned to communicate silently, plan several steps ahead, and use the terrain and technology around them in innovative ways. Every challenge became a lesson, and every lesson made them stronger. One example occurred in a dense forest where an unusual energy field had appeared. Equipment failed, The weather shifted unpredictably, and strange creatures designed by the aliens as tests moved silently through the trees. At first, the team hesitated, unsure how to proceed. But they quickly observed patterns, the way the creatures moved, the way the terrain shifted, and how the energy field reacted to their presence. Using observation and strategy, they navigated the forest successfully, completing objectives that the aliens had assumed would be impossible. This success was not accidental. Humans had learned to combine instinct with intelligence. They did not simply react, they anticipated. They could read subtle signs, predict changes, and adjust their actions instantly. Unlike any species the aliens had studied, humans learned from mistakes quickly, sharing insights with each other to improve outcomes. Every obstacle became an opportunity to grow stronger, and humans thrived under conditions that might have broken other species. Urban areas experienced a similar evolution. Sudden power failures, transportation disruptions, and unexpected environmental shifts forced humans to think creatively. Engineers and technicians improvised repairs, city officials coordinated emergency responses, and ordinary citizens found ways to support their communities. Humans were learning to work as a team under extreme pressure, combining skill, knowledge, and instinct to solve problems efficiently. Each success reinforced confidence and skill, creating a culture of adaptability across the globe. The aliens were watching silently, noting every detail. They had expected humans to be reactive, chaotic, and limited in capability. Instead, they found a species that could analyze, plan, and execute strategies faster than any calculation could predict. Humans were no longer simply reacting. They were anticipating, experimenting, and innovating. Every challenge revealed new abilities, the ability to track, to plan, to improvise, and to work together seamlessly. The aliens began to see that humans were not just survivors, they were hunters in the truest sense. The first major demonstration of this came during a desert test. An expansive energy field disrupted vehicles, communication, and navigation tools. Teams were cut off, left to navigate an unfamiliar and dangerous environment. Many species would have panicked or retreated. Humans did the opposite. They observed, studied patterns, and improvised solutions. They constructed temporary shelters, navigated dangerous terrain using natural cues, and completed their objectives with remarkable efficiency. The aliens were both impressed and cautious. Humans had exceeded every expectation. News of these adaptations began spreading among local communities. People shared knowledge of how to navigate anomalies, improvise tools, and anticipate environmental changes. Children began learning observation and problem-solving naturally, while adults discovered hidden abilities they had never noticed. Communities became stronger, more cohesive, and more resilient. Even ordinary humans were beginning to demonstrate extraordinary adaptability. Americans continued to lead, setting examples for skill, strategy, and ingenuity. Whether in wilderness areas, urban environments, or remote locations, they consistently demonstrated the ability to turn challenges into opportunities. Their instincts were sharpened, their intellect heightened, and their teamwork seamless. They were not just surviving, they were mastering the challenges the aliens presented. One of the most fascinating qualities to the aliens was humans' ability to turn observation into advantage. Every failure, every mistake became a lesson. Humans learned quickly, adapted faster, and shared knowledge instantly. Unlike other species, which might rely purely on instinct, humans combined intuition, intellect, and collaboration to improve constantly. This made them unpredictable, dangerous, and incredibly effective. A particularly revealing event involved a synthetic creature designed to test tracking and hunting skills. The creature was fast, silent, and designed to move unpredictably through difficult terrain. A group of humans, including Americans trained in survival and strategy, tracked it through forests and hills. They studied its patterns, anticipated its movements, and coordinated their actions. By the time they reached the objective, they had outsmarted the creature entirely. The aliens observing were forced to acknowledge that humans could learn, strategize, and execute plans in ways they had never seen before. Humans were learning to see patterns where none seemed to exist. They could anticipate environmental changes, predict behavior, and adapt strategies quickly. Their ability to combine instincts with logic made them hunters in every sense. The aliens realized that the humans' intelligence was amplified by their survival instincts, creating a combination that was impossible to calculate or control. As this evolution continued, ordinary humans began showing surprising abilities. Communities adapted to sudden changes. People worked together to overcome obstacles, and skills that were once rare became widespread. Americans, while still leading the charge, inspired others by demonstrating courage, innovation, and precision under pressure. Humans were no longer passive. They were becoming active participants, turning challenges into opportunities and obstacles into lessons. The aliens began to realize that humans were not just surviving, they were mastering the tests. Every challenge revealed a new layer of human capability, the ability to track, strategize, communicate, improvise, and adapt. Every obstacle became a chance to grow stronger, faster, and smarter. Unlike any other species in the galaxy, humans could turn adversity into a tool for improvement. The rise of humans as hunters became evident when small teams began taking control of challenges instead of simply responding to them. In forests, deserts, and mountains, humans learned to anticipate the movements of synthetic creatures, energy fields, and shifting terrain. They tracked, planned, and executed their objectives with precision. They used observation, strategy, and teamwork to turn even the most dangerous tests into manageable tasks. In cities, humans demonstrated similar skills. Engineers, officials, and citizens coordinated during crises with a speed and efficiency that seemed instinctive. Communication was seamless, decisions were quick, and problems were solved with creativity and innovation. Ordinary humans were becoming extraordinary under pressure. Communities grew stronger, sharing knowledge and skills and preparing for any situation. The aliens' perception of humans shifted completely. They had underestimated this species. Initially seen as reactive and limited, humans were now recognized as predators, hunters, and strategists. They observed threats, adapted strategies, and executed plans with precision. Unlike any species the aliens had studied, humans combined instinct with intellect, creativity, and collaboration. Every test, every challenge revealed their capacity to evolve and dominate. Americans, leading this evolution, became the benchmark for human potential. Their ability to adapt, think strategically, and work together made them particularly effective. Across the globe, humans were learning to observe, anticipate, and respond. They had become hunters, not just in skill but in instinct, turning every challenge into a lesson and every obstacle into an advantage. By the end of this stage, humans had proven themselves in ways that were impossible to ignore. The aliens had initiated the tests, but humans had turned them into opportunities to demonstrate skill, intelligence, and instinct. They were no longer simply reacting. They were controlling the outcomes, adapting to every new challenge, and mastering skills that would make them a force in the galaxy. And while humans continued to live their lives mostly unaware of the scale of observation, the aliens had learned a truth that could not be denied. This species, underestimated for centuries, was capable of extraordinary feats. They were hunters, thinkers, and strategists, and Americans were leading the way. The galaxy had yet to fully understand humans, but the aliens knew one thing for certain: humans were not to be underestimated. They were predators, capable of adapting, mastering, and dominating challenges like no other species before them. By the time humans had reached this stage, the aliens realized something they had never expected. Humans were no longer just reacting to challenges. They were shaping the outcome of every test. Every obstacle had become an opportunity for learning, innovation, and improvement. The energy fields, the strange creatures, and the environmental anomalies that had once been terrifying were now challenges humans could navigate, anticipate, and even exploit. The aliens began to understand that humans had become the ultimate hunters, capable of mastering both instinct and strategy in ways no other species could. In deserts and forests, Americans led the charge. Teams moved with precision, reading every subtle cue in the environment, predicting obstacles, and planning multiple steps ahead. They used observation and logic to track creatures, understand energy patterns, and navigate shifting terrain. Unlike any species the aliens had studied, humans could learn from each experience and apply that knowledge instantly. What had once been a dangerous challenge became a calculated exercise. The aliens, watching silently, started to feel a mix of fascination and caution. Even urban humans who had once relied on technology and infrastructure had evolved. Sudden power failures, communication disruptions, and transportation breakdowns forced cities to adapt. Engineers invented temporary solutions. Officials coordinated rapidly, and ordinary citizens stepped up, learning to communicate, plan, and act efficiently under pressure. Communities had become resilient, connected, and adaptable. Humans were not just surviving, they were mastering their environment. The aliens began testing humans on a larger scale. They orchestrated complex scenarios, combining environmental shifts, energy disruptions, and synthetic creatures in patterns that were impossible to predict. At first, the aliens expected chaos, confusion, and failure. But humans were ready. They observed carefully, developed strategies, and coordinated actions across large groups. Each test revealed new layers of human skill: tracking, anticipation, communication, and improvisation. Every failure was transformed into a lesson, and every success reinforced their abilities. Americans continued to excel. Their experience in wilderness survival, problem-solving, and teamwork made them particularly effective. They moved calmly through dangerous terrain, solved complex challenges using limited resources, and adapted instantly to unpredictable situations. Humans were demonstrating qualities the aliens had never seen in any species before: ingenuity under pressure, instinct amplified by intellect, and the ability to learn and improve at an extraordinary pace. One example occurred in a dense forest where a combination of environmental shifts and synthetic creatures created a situation the aliens believed would be impossible to navigate. The humans entering the forest were forced to move without modern tools, relying on observation, strategy, and instinct. They tracked patterns in creature behavior, anticipated terrain changes, and used improvised tools to overcome obstacles. By the end of the test, they had completed objectives with speed and precision that shocked the aliens. Humans were now beginning to turn the tables on the tests themselves. Instead of merely reacting, they anticipated the aliens' moves. They studied patterns, predicted environmental changes, and coordinated strategies that allowed them to succeed in every challenge. Their instincts were honed, their minds sharp, and their ability to innovate unmatched. Unlike any other species, humans were learning faster than the aliens could calculate, demonstrating a combination of intuition, intellect, and strategy that was impossible to predict. The rise of humans as hunters became undeniable. Across forests, deserts, mountains, and cities, humans demonstrated skills that combined instinct, intelligence, and collaboration. They tracked, adapted, and overcame obstacles with speed and precision. The aliens recognized that humans had become something unique, a species capable of mastering every challenge presented to them, and even using the test to grow stronger. Americans, once ordinary citizens in a vast population, had become symbols of human potential. Their actions inspired others, showing that instinct, strategy, and teamwork could overcome any challenge. They moved calmly through dangerous situations, solved problems creatively, and adapted instantly to changes in their environment. Every action, every decision, and every strategy revealed the depth of human capability. Even ordinary humans had evolved. Communities were stronger, communication was faster, and collective problem-solving had become instinctive. Children learned observation and strategy naturally, while adults discovered hidden talents they had never realized. Humans were no longer passive. They were active participants in shaping their environment and mastering every challenge thrown at them. The aliens began to understand that humans were not just a species, they were a force. They had underestimated Earth's inhabitants, assuming that intelligence or technology alone would define their abilities. Instead, humans combined instinct, intellect, and collaboration in ways that no other species had ever demonstrated. They were not just survivors, they were hunters, strategists, and innovators capable of mastering any environment. A particularly revealing event occurred in a vast desert where multiple energy fields intersected with moving synthetic creatures. The aliens expected chaos, but the humans entering the desert worked with extraordinary coordination. Teams observed patterns, predicted movements, and adapted tools to overcome obstacles. They communicated silently, anticipated problems, and completed objectives faster than the aliens expected. It was a demonstration not just of survival, but of mastery. Humans had learned to exploit the test themselves. Each challenge provided information, lessons, and opportunities for improvement. They studied the environment, analyzed anomalies, and used each encounter to strengthen skills and strategies. Humans were not simply reacting. They were shaping outcomes, learning from every event, and preparing for what was next. Across the globe, Americans became leaders in this new era of human evolution. Their ability to combine instinct with intellect and strategy made them highly effective in every scenario. They moved calmly through chaos, solved problems creatively, and inspired others to adapt and improve. Humans as a species were evolving into hunters capable of mastering every challenge, turning obstacles into opportunities, and turning survival into dominance. The aliens, observing quietly, had no choice but to acknowledge the truth. Humans had become the galaxy's ultimate hunters. They were unpredictable, intelligent, adaptable, and capable of learning faster than any calculation could predict. Every obstacle became a lesson, every test an opportunity, and every challenge a chance to demonstrate skill, strategy, and instinct. Humans were no longer just a species, they were a force unlike any other. And as humans continued to live their lives, mostly unaware of the scale of observation, they demonstrated their mastery quietly but effectively. They adapted to changing environments, solved impossible problems, and improved skills with every experience. Americans, in particular, had become the standard of human potential, leading the way in strategy, instinct, and innovation. The aliens realized that humans could no longer be underestimated. They had watched, studied, and tested the species, and every prediction had been challenged. Humans combined instinct with intelligence, learned rapidly from failure, and applied knowledge creatively. They worked together, shared strategies, and adapted to environments in ways that no other species had ever done. They were hunters, strategists, and masters of survival. By the end of this stage, humans had proven themselves fully. The tests had revealed a species capable of handling threats beyond Earth, mastering challenges that the aliens had assumed would be impossible. Americans, leading the charge, had demonstrated extraordinary skill, strategy, and instinct. Humans were no longer passive, they were active hunters, shaping their environment and turning challenges into opportunities for growth. The aliens understood that the galaxy had underestimated humans for too long. They had assumed intelligence alone defined a species. But humans had proven that survival instinct, adaptability, and strategy were just as important, and in combination, they made humans formidable. The Earth's inhabitants were no longer just survivors, they were hunters, innovators, and leaders in a galaxy that had never seen their kind before. In the silent skies above Earth, the aliens observed humans with a mixture of awe and caution. They had come to study, to test, and to understand. Instead, they had witnessed the rise of hunters unlike any other. Humans had learned to anticipate, adapt, and dominate challenges. They had combined instinct, intelligence, and teamwork in ways that made them unpredictable and powerful. The aliens had discovered a truth that could not be ignored. Humans were the galaxy's ultimate hunters. And so, the story of humanity reached a new chapter. From ordinary beginnings through observation, challenge, and adaptation, humans had evolved into a species capable of mastering the impossible. Americans, leading by example, had shown the world that instinct, intelligence, and courage combined could create a force unlike any other. The galaxy would never underestimate humans again. Humans had risen. They were hunters. They were masters of strategy, adaptation, and survival, and the aliens watching from above had no choice but to acknowledge the truth. Humans had earned their place as the ultimate hunters,